You know, when we hear the words government shutdown, it's pretty easy to just picture political drama on the news. But behind all those headlines, there's a much more personal story unfolding for a lot of people. So let's take a look at the real world ripple effect of what happens when the government just hits pause.
So, where are we at right now? Well, the government's been on hold for a while, and we've actually just crossed a pretty significant and, frankly, a really worrying milestone.
Yep, as of October 20th, 2025, we are on day 20. 20 straight days of a partial government closure. And with every single day that ticks by, the pressure on the whole system, and especially on the people who work for it, just keeps building and building. And that pressure? It's felt most by this number right here, 750,000. That is the number of federal employees who have been furloughed. That means they've been sent home from their jobs without pay since this whole thing started. It's a huge, almost unbelievable figure.
But a number that big can be kind of hard to wrap your head around, right? So the real question is, what does this actually mean for the individuals, for the families behind that massive number? Let's break down the real tangible consequences.
This is exactly where those abstract political decisions in Washington, D.C. hit home. This is the human cost of the shutdown. And it all starts with something we can all relate to, the paycheck.
Okay, this timeline really lays out how that financial squeeze is getting tighter.
For a lot of folks, the trouble started around October 10th when smaller paychecks started showing up. But the real crisis points, they're right around the corner. If this shutdown keeps going, the first full paychecks will be missed on October 24th. And for hundreds of thousands of households, that's the moment this goes from just being difficult to being desperate. And as if missed pay isn't stressful enough, there's a much more permanent threat that's now looming over these workers, the very real possibility of losing their jobs for good. The administration has already kicked off the process for layoffs, and the projections are putting that number north of 10,000. So on top of the immediate how do I pay my bills problem, there's this huge cloud of long-term uncertainty. But it's really important to understand that not all the affected employees are in the exact same situation. There's a critical difference between two main groups here, and they're both facing very different but equally difficult circumstances. So on one side, you have furloughed workers. These are the people who've been sent home. They aren't working and they can apply for unemployment. But on the other side, you have essential workers. These are the people required by law to show up for their jobs, except they aren't getting paid. It's a crazy paradox, right? Being told you're too important to stay home, but apparently not important enough to get your paycheck? So who are these essential workers? Well, think about the people who keep us safe and keep the country moving. We're talking about TSA officers screening you at the airport, the air traffic controllers guiding our planes safely, and federal prison employees who have to maintain security. They are all still on the job, working without pay. And this is where the shutdown starts to affect everyone, not just federal employees. I mean, when people are forced to work without getting paid, staffing shortages are pretty much inevitable. So the result for you and me? You guessed it, potentially longer security lines and bigger wait times at the airport. It's a direct consequence we can all see and feel.
So with all these serious consequences piling up for workers and for the public, the obvious question is, what is being done in Washington to actually fix this?
Well, we do have a glimmer of official optimism. A White House economic advisor has actually gone on record predicting the shutdown is likely to end sometime this week. Sounds promising, right? But the reality of getting a law passed is way more complicated. For example, one idea floating around is to pay the essential employees who are still working. But that same proposal would leave the 750,000 furloughed workers completely out. It really just shows you how far apart the two sides are on a solution. And that brings us right to the heart of the matter. This entire shutdown is stuck in a partisan standoff. The disagreements are all about key funding issues. And until some kind of compromise is reached on those core points, the stalemate and the shutdown, it just continues. So, while the political gears grind to a halt, how are the families actually affected getting by? Let's take a look at the lifelines that are being offered by communities and organizations that are stepping into the gap. We're seeing some really great things, like zero-interest loans being offered by credit unions. Food assistance programs are being activated, especially in states like Maryland and Virginia that have large federal workforces. And remember, those furloughed workers are eligible to apply for unemployment benefits to help bridge this gap. Now, there is one critical piece of good news in all of this, at least for the long term. Federal law guarantees that once the funding is finally restored, all furloughed employees will get back pay for the time they missed. But of course, that promise doesn't help pay this month's rent or buy groceries for the family today.
It really just all boils down to one fundamental question, doesn't it? When the paychecks of 750,000 people are used as political leverage in Washington, who is it that really pays the price?